Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is WireDogSec back with another video for you guys. Today we are continuing on with TryHackMe's offensive security learning path. This is the persisting Active Directory room. It says learn about common Active Directory persistent techniques that can be used post-compromise to ensure the blue team will not be able to kick you out during a red team exercise. Now, let's go ahead and dive into it. Task 1, Introduction. This network is the continuation of the breaching AD, enumerating AD, and exploiting AD networks. Please make sure to complete these networks before continuing with this one. Also note that that we will discuss AD objects extensively. If you need another refresher, have a quick rescan of this room. Now that we have exploited AD and achieved some positions from which we can execute our goals, we need to make sure that we deploy persistence to make sure the blue team can't just kick us out. In this network, we will explore several different methods that could be used to persist in AD. AD persistence. During our attack against AD, we need to make sure that we deploy persistence. This will ensure that the blue team can't kick us out by simply rotating some credentials. As mentioned before, the process of compromising AD is cyclic. We would deploy persistence as we compromise the AD estate and not just at the very end. This ensures that if one of our positions gets burnt by the blue team, we have several fallbacks. In this persistence phase, we will use several techniques that can ensure our gain access cannot simply be revoked. These persistent techniques are dependent on the specific permissions and privileges we have acquired thus far. And there's a little graphic what it looks like here of the process. Learning objectives. In this network, we will cover several methods that can be used to persist in AD. This is by no means a complete list, as available methods are usually highly situational and dependent on the AD structure and environment. However, we will cover the following techniques for persisting AD. AD credentials and DC syncing, silver and golden tickets, AD certificates, AD security identifier SIDs, access control lists, group policy objects, GPOs. All right, and these are the instructions on how to connect to this environment. So follow this. We're going to use the attack box. I'm already connected, as you can see, via my personal Kali VM. All right, and I'm going to skip through all of this here. Et cetera, already done. All right, task number 2, persistence through credentials. Congratulations, weary traveler. After breaching AD, performing enumeration and exploiting it all the way to the top, if you have done these AD networks in order, you have finally made it to the Tavern of Persistence. The hard work is over and it is now time for some fun. While AD Persistence is still serious business, it is really not as stressful as the other phases. Here, we can let our creativity flow free, so rest your weary bones in our tavern, get yourself a nice cup of tea, and let's begin. Together with your low privilege credentials, you will be provided with domain administrator credentials. What luck! When discussing persistent techniques, you will use the privileged credentials to perform the persistent technique on your low privileged credential set. Make a note of the following DA account. So let's go ahead and take note of that here. All right, I'm just going to do a nano and then create, I guess, let's see, da.txt. All right, and then just copy and paste the stuff over like so. Okay. Then ZA for the domain. All right, so let's go ahead and exit, save it. There we go. Now we're set. You can double check it as well. So da.txt. There we go. All right. Since we provide you with full access over the entire domain, we can't really hide any flags or force you to make sure you perform these persistent techniques yourself before answering the questions. It is, however, encouraged that you take your time to work through these methods, as they will pay dividends in order or in return on a red team assessment when the blue team starts kicking you out. The first and least reliable persistent technique that we will discuss is credentials. Several of the lateral techniques discussed in previous rooms would have resulted in the attacker gaining access to credentials. When using the word credentials, it can mean a username and password pair, but in the context of AD, even the password hash is sufficient for authentication through pass the hash techniques. DC sync. It is not sufficient to have a single domain controller per domain in large organizations. These domains are often used in multiple regional locations, and having a single DC would significantly delay any authentication services in AD. As such, these organizations make use of multiple DCs. The question then becomes, how is it possible for you to authenticate using the same credentials in two different offices? The answer to that question is domain replication. Each domain controller runs a process called the Knowledge Consistency Checker, KCC. The KCC generates a replication topology of or for the AD forest and automatically connects to other domain controllers through remote procedure calls RPC to synchronize information. This includes updated information such as the user's new password and new objects such as when a new user is created. This is why you usually have to wait a couple of minutes before you authenticate after you changed your password, since the DC where the password change occurred could perhaps not be the same one as the one where you are authenticating to. The process of replication is called DC synchronization. It is not just the DCs that can initiate replication. Accounts such as those belonging to domain admins groups can also do it for legitimate purposes, such as creating a new domain controller. A popular attack to perform is a DC sync attack. If we have access to an account that has domain replication permissions, we can stage a DC sync attack to harvest credentials from a DC. Not all credentials are created equal. Before starting our DC sync attack, let's first discuss what credentials we could potentially hunt for. While we should always look to dump privileged credentials such as those that are members of the domain admins group, there are also the credentials that will be rotated a blue team term, meaning to reset the account's password first. Um, as such, if we only have privileged accounts or privileged credentials, it is safe to say as soon as the blue team discovers us, they will rotate those accounts and we can potentially lose our access. The goal then is to persist with near privileged credentials. We don't always need to or need the full keys to the kingdom. We just need enough keys to ensure we can still achieve goal execution and always make the blue team look over the shoulder. As such, we should attempt to persist through credentials such as the following. Credentials that have local administrator rights on several machines. Usually organizations have a group or two with local admin rights on almost all computers. These groups are typically divided into one for workstations and one for servers. By harvesting the credentials of members of these groups, we would still have access to most of the computers in the estate. Service accounts that have delegation permissions. With these accounts, we would be able to force golden and silver tickets to perform Kerberos delegation attacks. Accounts used for privileged AD services. If we compromise accounts of privileged services such as Exchange, Windows Server Update Services, WSUS, or System Center Configuration Manager, SCCM, we could leverage AD exploitation to once again gain a privileged foothold. When it comes to what credentials to dump and persist through, it is subject to many things. You will have to get creative in your thinking and take it on a case by case basis. However, for this room, we are going to have some fun, make the blue team sweat, and dump every single credential we can get our hands on. Awesome. DC sync all. We will be using Mimikatz to harvest credentials, SSH into THM work 1 using DA account and load Mimikatz. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so let me go ahead and exit out of this. So exit out of this session up here, and then log in with these DA creds. So let me go ahead and clear this out, and then we need to change this to, I guess, administrator. Awesome. Okay, and we need to start at Mimikatz. I got Mimikatz fired up here, so navigate to this directory here and fire off Mimikatz. Now let's continue on. It says let's start by performing DC sync of a single account our own. So I'm going to copy and paste this over like so. And it needs to be our low privilege account. And let me see what that is real quick. It was Chloe, yeah, Chloe Porter. So Chloe or Potter, Chloe.Potter. Okay, and that was quick. It looks like it was successful. All right, Awesome. So you will see quite a bit of output, including the current NTLM hash of your account. You can verify that the NTLM hash is correct by using a website such as this. So check that website out if you're interested to transfer your password into an NTLM hash. This is great and all, but we want to DC sync every single account. To do this, we will have to enable logging on Mimikatz. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to hit enter here. All right, so log. And I guess they want this low level user count. So Chloe, Potter, dcdump.txt. All right. So it says make sure to change your username to the username as to not overwrite the log dump of other users. Now, instead of specifying our account, we'll use the all flag. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to up arrow and change this to all. Okay, looks good to go. Hit enter. It says this will take a bit of time to complete. Once done, exit Mimikatz to finalize the dump. Fine, and then you can download the username, blah blah blah, DC dump text file. You can use cat and then grep sam username to recover all usernames, and cat um, grep hash NTLM for all hashes. We can now either perform an offline password cracking attack to recover the plaintext credentials, or simply perform a pass the hash attack with Mimikatz. Question time. What is the Mimikatz command to perform DC sync for the username of test on the ZA TryHackMe local domain? And what is the NTLM hash associated with the KRB TGT user? All right, so let's go ahead and try to grab this first one here. And I'm going to see if I can just copy and paste the command up here, like so. And let's go ahead and plug this in. And it says test. What happened here? Oh my gosh. So this should be correct. Yep. Now let's go ahead and wait till this finishes and we'll come back and try to get this hash. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Be sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Once you subscribe, be sure to hit that notification bell. All right, so you know every time I post a new video. As you can see here, most people that view my videos, view my channel, are not subscribed. Now, if you do subscribe, it will help me get into the YouTube algorithm so that we can continue to grow our glorious community here. As always, thank you all for taking the time to watch. Have a nice day and enjoy the video. Now, I went ahead and already downloaded the file using SCP and the following command, such as this. All right. Also, I went ahead and did the cat for it and everything. So you can go ahead and cat, see the hashes in there, etc., etc. And it wants us to get the hash for this KRB TGT user. So all I did was open it up in mousepad. You can use whatever method you want. I opened it up in mousepad, right? And then did a control F and then typed in the name here, KRB TGT, like so. Okay, and went ahead and grabbed the hash right there. So that's done. Now let's continue on to task number 3, persistence through tickets. And let's see what they say here. As discussed in the previous task, we often want to persist through service counts with delegation permissions to forward silver and gold tickets, but what are those exactly and why does every blue team tabletop exercise end with someone shouting, flush all golden and silver tickets? Tickets to the chocolate factory. Before getting into golden and silver tickets, we first just need to do a quick recap on Kerberos authentication. The diagram below shows the normal flow for Kerberos authentication. And this is what it looks like here. So be sure to review that. We're going to continue on. The user makes an ASREQ to the key distribution center on the DC that includes a timestamp encrypted with the user's NTLM hash. Essentially, this is the request for a ticket granting ticket. The DC checks the information and sends the TGT to the user. This TGT is signed with the KRB TGT account's password hash that is only stored on the DC. The user can now send this TGT to the DC to request a ticket granting service for the resource that the user wants to access. If the TGT checks out, the DC responds to the TGS that is encrypted with the NTLM hash of the service that the user is requesting access for. The user then presents this TGS to the service for access, which can verify the TGS since it knows its own hash and can grant the user access. With all of that background theory being said, it is time to look into golden and silver tickets. Golden tickets. Golden tickets are forged TGTs. What this means is we bypass steps 1 and 2 of the diagram above, where we prove to the DC who we are. Having a valid TGT of a privileged account, we can now request a TGS for almost any service we want. In order to forge a golden ticket, we need the KRB TGT account password hash so that we can sign a TGT for any user account we want. Some interesting notes about golden tickets. By injecting at this stage of the Kerberos process, we don't need the password hash of the account we want to impersonate since we bypass that step. The TGT is only used to prove that the KDC on a DC signed it. Since it was signed by the KRB TGT hash, this verification passes and the TGT is declared valid no matter its contents. Speaking of contents, the KDC will only validate the user account specified in the TGT if it is older than 20 minutes. This means we can put a disabled, deleted, or non-existent account in the TGT and it will be valid as long as we ensure the timestamp is not older than 20 minutes. Since the policies and rules for tickets are set in the TGT itself, we could overwrite the values pushed by the KDC, such as, for example, that tickets should only be valid for 10 hours. We could, for instance, ensure that our TGT is valid for 10 years, granting us persistence. By default, the KRB TGT account password never changes, meaning once we have it, unless it is manually rotated, we have persistent access by generating TGTs forever. Now you can read the rest here, pause the video and do so. I'm going to continue on for the sake of time. Apart from the KRB TGT account's password hash, we only need the domain name, domain SID, and user ID for the person we want to impersonate. If we are in a position where we can recover the KRB TGT account's password hash, we would already be in a position where we can recover the other pieces of the required information. Silver tickets. Silver tickets are forged TGS tickets. So now we skip all communication, step 1 through 4 in the diagram above. We would have had the KDC on the DC and just interface with the service we want to access directly. Some interesting notes about silver tickets. The generated TGS is signed by the machine account of the host we are targeting. The main difference between golden and silver tickets is the number of privileges we acquire. If we have the KRB TGT account's password hash, we can get access to everything. With a silver ticket, since we only have access to the password hash of the machine account of the server we are attacking, we can only impersonate users on that host itself. The silver ticket scope is limited to whatever service is targeted on the specified server. Since the TGS is forged, there is no associated TGT, meaning the DC was never contacted. This makes the attack incredibly dangerous since the only available logs would be on the targeted server. So while the scope is more limited, it is significantly harder for the blue team to detect. And pause the video to read the rest here while I continue on with the video. Forging tickets for fun and profit. Now that we have explained the basics of gold and silver tickets, let's generate some. You will need the NTLM hash of the KRB TGT account, which you should now have due to the DC sync performed in the previous task. Furthermore, make a note of the NTLM hash associated with the THM Server 1 machine account since we will need this for one of our silver tickets. You can find this information in the DC dump that you performed. The last piece of information we need is the domain SID. Using our lower privileged SSH terminal on THM Work 1, we can use the ADRSAT commandlet to recover this information. So I am just going to copy and paste up above here. So go ahead and clear this out and let's see. Let's go ahead and get AD admin. or get AD domain, like so. Okay, now that's running. It says now that we have all the required information, we can relaunch Mimikatz with the following information here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. So we're far off Mimikatz, and it says once Mimikatz is loaded, perform the following to generate the golden ticket, like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, now I'm ready to go. I'm gonna hit enter, fire it off. It says it was successfully submitted for current session, and here's the parameters explained. So read through this here so you know what they're talking about. We can verify that the golden ticket is working by running the dir command against the domain controller as usual, right? And let's go ahead and just copy and paste. First, we need to exit out of Mimikatz, like so. Okay, you can also do the, what is it? I think it was K-list, right? So you can see it in there. And then paste. Okay, it looks good to go. Even if the golden ticket has an incredibly long time, the blue team can still defend against this by simply rotating the KRB TGT password twice. If we really want to dig in our roots, we want to generate silver tickets, which are less likely to be discovered and significantly harder to defend against since the passwords of every machine account must be rotated. We can use the following Mimikatz command to generate a silver ticket. So let's go ahead and do that. And we need to get back inside of Mimikatz. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. And I'm not sure if we need to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to run into any possible issues here. All right, so we need to go to and change some things in here. Now we're ready to go. I have everything filled out here. Hit enter. And it says it's successful. So be sure to read through here because you'll need this information to input here. All right, so we can verify the silver ticket is working by running the dir against the THM server one. And let's go ahead and do that here. All right, so let me exit out of here. Okay, clear the screen. You do K-list as well. And paste. All right, it says it's good, so let's go ahead and continue on. All right, now I guess you can try clearing out or purging the tickets and then doing it again. But anyway, let's continue. Now we have golden and silver tickets to the AD environment, providing better persistence than just credentials. Which AD accounts NTLM hash is used to sign that? That's going to be, what was it, KRB? Okay. What is the name of a ticket that impersonates a legitimate TGT? That was the, I believe that was the golden ticket. Can't remember which one. Yeah, and this other one's the silver ticket. Yeah, the service. Yep. Silver ticket. And then, what is the default lifetime in years of a golden ticket? I mean, that was 30. No, it was 10. Yep. Task 4, persistence through certificates. And let's see what they have for us here. It says, a quick note here, the technique discussed from this point of view forward are incredibly invasive and hard to remove. Even if you have sign off on your red team exercise to perform these techniques, you must take the utmost caution when performing these techniques. In the real-world scenarios, the exploitation of most of these techniques would result in a full domain rebuild. Make sure you only or fully understand the consequences of using these techniques and only perform them if you have prior approval on your assessment and they are deemed necessary. In most cases, a red team exercise would be dechained at this point instead of using these techniques, meaning you could or you would most likely not perform these persistent techniques but rather simulate them. Honestly, I wouldn't even do the golden ticket attack because they have to go through and do all that rotation and stuff like that. I would just say that, hey, I have these privileges now and I could create these methods of persistence, right? And just note it in the report for the client. The last two persistent techniques relied on credentials. While we can definitely make the blue team's lives complicated, they can ultimately rotate enough credentials to kick us out. So while these techniques are great to keep the blue team busy, while we keep them busy, we should look to use persistent techniques that are credential agnostic, meaning the rotation of these will not kick us out. The first of these we will be looking at is certificates, the return of ADCS. In the exploiting AD room, we leverage certificates to become domain admins. However, certificates can also be used for persistence. All we need is a valid certificate that can be used for client authentication. This will allow us to use the certificate to request a TGT. The beauty of this, we can continue requesting TGTs no matter how many rotations they do on the account we are attacking. The only way we can be kicked out is if they revoke the certificate we generated or if it expires, meaning we probably have persistence access by default for roughly the next 5 years. That's absolutely diabolical. If you are interested in a refresh about requesting a certificate and using it for Kerberos authentication, please go to either the Exploiting AD or AD Certificates template room. However, in this room, we are not messing around. We are going after the certificate authority itself. Depending on our access, we can take it another step further. We can simply steal the private key of the root CA's certificate to generate our own certificates whenever we feel like it. Even worse, since these certificates were never issued by the CA, the blue team has no ability to revoke them. This would be even worse for the blue team since it would mean a rotation of the CA, meaning all issued certificates would have to be revoked by the blue team to kick us out. Imagine you've just spent the last 2 days performing a domain take back by rotating the credentials of every single privileged account, resetting all the gold and silver tickets just to realize the attacker persisted by becoming your CA. Yikes. Extracting the private key. The private key of the CA is stored on the CA server itself. If the private key is not protected through hardware-based protection methods such as hardware security module, aka a HSM, which is often the case for organizations that just use Active Directory Certificate Services, ADCS, for internal purposes. It is protected by the Machine Data Protection API, DPAPI. This means we can use tools such as Mimikatz and Sharp DPAPI to extract the CA certificate and thus the private key from the CA. Mimikatz is the simplest tool to use, but if you want to experience other tools, have a look here. Use SSH to authenticate to THMDC, yada yada yada, using the administrator credentials from task 2. Create a unique directory for your user, move to it, and load Mimikatz. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to exit out of this and exit again. Clear the screen and I'll go ahead and cat those credentials. Get them ready to go. All right, so we'll need to navigate to that DC machine. Replace this here with THM DC. Okay, and get this ready to go. Copy and yes, paste. Awesome. Okay, so let's see here. Let's do a dir. Okay, so we need to go to, I'm assuming, the tools directory. So let's see, CD and C. There's tools. Okay, dir on it, and there's Mimikatz. All right, so awesome. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just launch PowerShell. Oh yeah, clear all this out. Okay, and let's see here. So we need to make our own directory. I'm just gonna do it here. Make dir, oops, make dir, and then there. Okay. City into it, and it wants us to go ahead and launch Mimikatz. So I'm gonna do it like this. See if I can do it like this. Awesome, cool. And it says let's first see if we can view the certificate stored on the DC. First, let's go ahead and do the usual here. I'm just trying to get in the habit of doing it. Okay. And going to copy and paste this over. Let's see. Okay, maybe I had extra space in there or something. Yeah. So let me delete the space out of here. There we go. And everything looks good. So I'm gonna scroll up a little bit. So we can just take a quick look here. And it looks like it was successful. So let's see, we can see that there is a CA certificate on the DC. We can also note that some of these certificates were set not to allow us to export the key. Without this private key, we would not be able to generate new certificates. Luckily, Mimikatz allows us to patch memory to make these keys exportable. All right, so I've already done the first part there. And let's go ahead and paste this in. Okay, patched, awesome. And let's do this here. Okay, if you get an error, don't worry. This means someone else executed the patch for you. With the services patched, we can use Mimikatz to export the certificates. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, looking good here. The exported certificates will be stored in both PFX and DER format. And let's go ahead and exit out of Mimikatz. Let me make sure. Okay. Yeah, we're going to exit out like so. And okay, there we go. Yep. So we're just basically looking at a directory of this. Everything looks good so far. The ZA, THM, DC, PFX certificate is the one we are particularly interested in order to export the private key. A password must be used to encrypt the certificate. By default, Mimikatz assigns the password of Mimikatz. Download or copy the certificate to your attack box using SCP and then copy it to your low privileged user's home directory on THM Work 1. You can also perform the rest of the steps on your own non-domain join machine if you prefer. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, as you can see, I've already ran this forgecert.exe tool here with the following information there. Now, if you want to get that file onto the workstation machine, you can fire up your Python 3 server and then just download it onto the machine. All right, that's exactly what I did. All right, as you can see there, invoke web request, yada, yada, yada. So let's go ahead and continue on here. And it says parameters explain. So you pause the video and read through this here. It says we can use Rubius to generate a TGT using the certificate to verify that the certificate is trusted. We will use the following command. So let's go ahead and do that. I already have it ready to go. So I'm going to paste it in there. And I need to change this. Oops, I can just hit this here. Copy a little bit too much there. So, all right, so it should be good to go. It says once we execute the command, we should receive the TGT. So let's see, that said it's building everything out, and we should have a similar output like that. So now we can use Mimikatz to load the TGT, and I got an error message here. I'm not sure what happened with that error message, but I'm just going to continue on. If you didn't get the error message, hey, congratulations, it's working for you, but for me, it's not working. So I'm just going to read through this. So now we can use Mimikatz to load the TGT and authenticate to the DC here. So just follow these directions here. All right, they're using that file that was generated, all right, to pass the ticket, and to check to make sure they have the proper permissions. They're doing the dir again on the $C $, as you can see there. And it says we are no longer friends with the blue team. Certificate persistence is significantly harder to defend against. Even if you rotate the credentials of the compromised account, the certificate will still be valid. The only way to remove the persistence is to issue a revocation of the certificate. However, this would only be possible if we generated the certificate through legitimate channels. Since we exported the CA and generated the certificate ourselves, it does not appear on ADCS's list of issued certificates, meaning the blue team will not be able to revoke our certificate. So what's the only option to remove the persistence? Well, this is why we are no longer friends. They will have to revoke the root CA certificate, but revoking the certificate means that all certificates issued by the ADCS would all of a sudden be invalid, meaning they would have to generate a new certificate for every system that uses ADCS. You would start to see why this type of persistence is incredibly dangerous and would require full rebuilds of systems if performed. Right, as I said it before, I would not do this, right? Because this could be a resume generating event if you did something like this. All right, the client will be pretty ticked off. But anyway, answering question time. What key is used to sign certificates to prove their authenticity? Remember, that's the private key. What application can be used to forge a certificate if we have the CA certificate and a private key? Remember, that was the forge cert.exe. And it says, what is the Mimikatz command to pass a ticket from a file with the name of ticket.kirby? And that's Kerberos, PTT for pass the ticket, and then ticket.kirby. Task 5, persistence through SID history. And let's see what they have for us here. The SIDs have been discussed before, but for a recap, SIDs are used to track the certificate or security principal and the account's access when connecting to resources. There is, however, an interesting attribute on accounts called the SID history. The legitimate use case of SID history is to enable access for an account to effectively be cloned to another. This becomes useful when an organization is busy performing an AD migration, as it allows users to retain access to the original domain while they are being migrated to new one. In the new domain, the user would have a new SID, but we can add the user's existing SID in the SID history, which we still allow them to access resources in the previous domain using their new account. While SID history is good for migrations, we as attackers can also abuse this feature for persistence. History can be whatever we want it to be. The thing is, SID history is not restricted to only including SIDs from other domains. With the right permissions, we can add a SID of our current domain to SID history of an account we control. Some interesting notes about this persistent technique. We normally require domain admin permission or privileges or the equivalent thereof to perform this attack. When the account creates a logon event, the SIDs associated with the account are added to the user's token, which then determines the privileges associated with the account. This includes group SIDs. We can take this attack a step further if we inject enterprise admin SID, since this would elevate the account's privileges to effective um, be a domain admin in all domains in the forest. Since the SIDs are added to the user's token, privileges would be respected even if the account is not a member of the actual group, making this a very sneaky method of persistence. We have all the permissions we need to compromise the entire domain, perhaps the entire forest, but our account can simply be a normal user account with membership only to the domain users group. We can use the sneakiness to another level using this account to alter the SID history of another account, so the initial persistence vector is not as easily discovered or remedied. Forging history. Get a SSH session on THMDC using administrator credentials for this next part. Before we forge SID history, let's just first get some information regarding SIDs. Firstly, let's make sure that our low privileged user does not currently have any information in their SID history. So let's go ahead and do that. Exit, exit, and oops, clear. And we need to log in as the administrator again. So I'm going to grab this password. Okay. And it says do the following. So I'm going to do that. PowerShell. All right. Get AD user, your AD user. So let's go ahead and do that. AD user, and it was Colby dot Potter properties. Oop, okay. And then I guess this is all one line. Oh, hold on a second here. Let's see. All right, let me try this first. I'm probably gonna get an error message. Member of, yeah. All right, so it needs a space in there. It's kind of hard to read that. Properties and then set history of, okay, there we go. And okay, everything looks good here. This confirms that our user does not currently have any SID history set. Let's get the SID of the domain admins group. Since this is the group we want to add our SID history to. Okay, and you can see that there's nothing there for SID history. This confirm, yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and do this here. I'm gonna copy and paste. Okay, there's the SID. We could use something like Mimikatz to add SID history. However, the latest version of Mimikatz has a flaw that does not allow it to patch LSASS to update SID history. Hence, we need something else. In this case, we can use DS internals tools to directly patch the nts.dit file, the AD database where all information is stored. And I'm going to copy and paste like so. Okay, and get this one ready here. All right. And we're gonna have to make some edits for this. So let's go ahead and do that here. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and make these edits. SID to add. All right, and assuming they want us to grab this one here. It's a DA, okay. Looks good. And then we need to fill this other placeholder in, which is the Chloe account. Okay. Colby dot Potter. Okay. And then we're going to start the service up again. All right. It says the NTDS database is locked when the NTDS service is running. In order to patch our SID history, we must first stop the service. You must restart the NTDS service after the patch. Otherwise, authentication for the entire network will not work anymore. After these steps have been performed, let's SSH into THM WR1 with our low privilege credentials and verify that the SID history was added and that we now have domain admin privileges. So let's go ahead and do that. Exit, exit, and then we're going to do that here. Okay. And let's go ahead and grab those creds. Oops, hit the wrong one. Meant to cat creds like that. All right. So copy that. Okay. And I'm going to get into PowerShell again. And we're going to do the same thing here, except we're going to use my account here, which is Chloe Potter. Properties, SID history. Okay. All right, there it is. Look at that. And they want us to test it as usual. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, looks good to go. Cool, I never even heard of this technique before. Based on the output above that worked, we were able to forge our SID history, granting our low privileged account DA access. Pitchforks and torches from the blue team. If you were To RDP into one of the hosts and use the AD users and groups snap-in, you would be able to view the SID history attribute added to your user. However, even with the highest privileges possible, you would not be able to remove the attribute since it's protected. In order to remove this, you would have to use tools such as ADD, RSAT, PowerShell commands to remove SID history. However, before you can even think about removing malicious SID history attributes, you must first need to find them. None of the regular tools will tell you that something is wrong. That user will not um, all of it a sudden pop-up as a member of the domain admins group. So unless you are actively filtering through the attributes on your users, this is incredibly hard to find. This is because the SID history is only applied and used once the user authenticates. Imagine that you are the blue team dealing with an incident where you have just performed a domain takeback. You rotated the Caribbean TGT accounts password twice, removed golden and silver tickets, and rebuilt your entire CA server from scratch just to see that the attacker is still performing DA commands with a low privileged account. This would not be a great day. What AD object attribute is normally used to specify SIDs from the object's previous domain to allow seamless migration to a new domain? What is the database file on the domain controller that stores all the information? What is the PowerShell command to restart SID values? All right, so let's see here. I probably just see if I can just grab it out of here. All right, so yeah, I believe this is SID history. Yep. And that is the tds.dit. I know that one. Uh, and to start the service after you inject it. So I'm just going to scroll up a little bit and grab it out of here. Okay, like so. And plug it in. Okay. Task number 6, persisting through a group membership. And let's see what they have for us here. If we don't want to tamper with SID histories, we can just add ourselves directly to AD groups for persistence. While SID history is great persistent technique, credential rotation and cleanup can still remove our persistence. In certain cases, it may be better to perform persistence by targeting the AD group themselves. Persistence group or persistence through group membership. As discussed in task 1, the most privileged account or group is not always the best to use for persistence. Privileged groups are monitored more closely for changes than others. Any group that classifies as a protected group, such as domain admins or enterprise admins, receive additional security scrutiny. So if we want to persist through group membership, we may need to get creative regarding the groups we add our own accounts to for persistence. The IT support group can be used to gain privileges such as force changing user passwords, although in most cases we won't be able to reset the passwords of privileged users. Having the ability to reset even low privileged users can allow us to spread to workstations. Groups that provide local administrator rights are often not monitored as closely as protected groups. With local administrator rights, the correct host through group membership of a network support group, we may have good persistence that can be used to compromise the domain again. It is not always about direct privileges. Sometimes groups with indirect privileges, such as owner over group policy objects, can be just as good for persistence. Next is groups. In most organizations, there are a significant amount of recursive groups. A recursive group is a group that is a member of another group. We can think of this as group nesting. Group nesting is used to create a more organized structure in AD. Take the IT support group, for example. IT support is very generic, so perhaps there are subgroups like help desk, access card managers, and network managers underneath this group. We can add all these groups as members of the IT support group, which gives all users in these subgroups the permissions and privileges associated with the IT support group, but we can then assign more granular permissions and privileges for each of these subgroups. While group nesting helps to organize AD, it does reduce the visibility of effective access. Take our IT support example. If we query AD for membership of the IT support group, it would respond with a count of 3. However, this count is not really true since it is 3 groups. To get an idea for effective access, we would now have to enumerate those subgroups as well. But those subgroups can also have subgroups. So the question becomes, how many layers deep should we enumerate to get the real effective access number? It sounds like a real rat's nest here. This also becomes a monitoring problem. Let's say, for instance, we have an alert that fires off when a new member is added to the domain admins group. This or that is a good alert to have, but it won't fire off if a user is added to a subgroup within a domain admins group. This is a very common problem since AD is managed by the AD team and alerting and monitoring are managed by the InfoSec team. All we need is a little bit of miscommunication and the alert is no longer valid since the subgroups are used. As an attacker, we can leverage this reduced visibility to perform persistence. Instead of targeting the privileged groups that would provide us with access to the environment, we focus our attention on the subgroups instead. Rather than adding ourselves to a privileged group that would raise an alert, we add ourselves to a subgroup that is not being monitored, nesting our persistence. It says, let's simulate this type of persistence in order to allow other users also to perform this technique. Make sure to prepend your username to all the groups that you create in order to simulate the persistence. We will create some of our own groups. Let's start by creating a new base group that we will hide in the people IT organizational unit. All right, I already went through this. Basically, you're going to keep adding your account to these groups. Like so, as you can see, I've already done this. You do it like a bunch of times. This is like group inception here. But anyway, let's continue on. All right, added it to the domain admins group at the end, right? So let me scroll back down. There we go. And let's see here. Okay, so this should be it. Now they want us to do this instantly. Your low privileged user account should now have privileged access to THMDC. Let's verify by using our SSH terminal on THM work 1 to do the following here. So let's do that and paste. So there we go. And it looks good to go. So let's see. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we're good. And it says, let's also verify that even though we created multiple groups, the domain admins group only has one new member. And we can do that by inputting this here. So let's go ahead and paste that in. Okay, there we go. Yep, one new member, and that's me right there. And it says, annoying more than just the blue team. If this was a real organization, we would not be creating new groups to nest. Instead, we would make use of existing groups to perform nesting. However, this is something you would never do on a normal red team assessment and almost always dechain at this point since it breaks the organization's AD structure. And if we sufficiently break it, they would not be able to recover. At this point, even if the blue team was to kick us out, the organization would more than likely still have to rebuild their entire AD structure from scratch, resulting in significant damages. What is the term used to describe AD groups that are members of the? This is going to be group nesting, and the next one says, what is the command to add a new member THM test to the AD group called THM group? And you can do that like this: add AD group member dash identity THM group dash members THM test. All right. Task number 7, persisting through ACLs or ACLs, however you want to call them. And let's see what they say. Sometimes we need more than just persisting to normal AD groups. What if we want to persist to all protected groups simultaneously? Persisting through AD group templates. While we can just add an account we control to every single privileged group, we can find the blue team would still be able to perform cleanup and remove our membership in order to ensure a bit better persistence and make the blue team scratch their heads. We should rather inject into the templates that generate the default groups. By injecting into these templates, even if they remove our membership, we just need to wait until the template refreshes and we once again be granted membership. One such template is admin SD holder container. This container exists in every AD domain, and its ACL is used as a template to copy permissions to all protected groups. Protected groups include privileged groups such as domain admins, administrators, enterprise admins, and schema admins. If you are looking for the full list of groups, you can find them here. So check that out if you're interested. A process called SD prop takes the ACL of the admin SD holder container and applies it to all protected groups every 60 minutes. We can thus write an ACE that will grant us full permissions on all protected groups If the blue team is not aware that this type of persistence is being used, it will be quite frustrating. Every time they remove the inappropriate permission on the protected object or group, it reappears within the hour. Since the reconstruction occurs through normal AD processes, it would also not show any alert to the blue team, making it harder to pinpoint the source of the persistence. Persisting with AD holder. Sorry, admin SD holder. In order to deploy our persistence to the admin SD holder, we will use Microsoft Management Console. To avoid kicking users out of RDP sessions, it will be best to RDP into THM Work 1 using your low privilege credentials. Use the run as command to inject the administrator credentials and then execute MMC from this new terminal. All right, so we can do the following here. It says once you have an MMC window, add the users and groups, snap in, file, admin, snap in. Okay, so we need to RDP into the machine. And to do that, let me go ahead and kill this. We don't need that anymore. Clear all this out, and we can use Remina to do all that. So let me go ahead and bring it up here. And we need to get into work one. Right, yeah. So let me see if I can just use there's the name here and enter. Okay, accept the certificate. And was it Chloe dot Potter? And what was the name or the password again? Okay, let's go back here. Oops, I need to move this real quick. All right, this will be za dot tryhackme dot loc. See if this works. All right, it's taking a little bit to connect via RDP. Hopefully this doesn't lag too much once we get into it. All right, so I can't do it that way. I have to use the IP, I guess. And let's try that. Let's do 10 dots. 200.62.20. Oh, I got the wrong one. 248. Okay. All right, let's try this again. All right, let's see if this works now. Awesome. Okay, so now we need to open up MMC, and if I remember correctly, you can make this a lot bigger using this, if it lets me. Nope, okay. Let's try it this way. All right, so now we need to get into MMC. Yeah. All right. So we need to do this. Let's try this here. Enter the password, and let's see if I can remember what it was. So clear this out. And me cat those creds. Okay. Go back to my session here. Awesome. Okay. So now I think I just type in MMC. Yeah. And I'm trying to make this a little bit bigger. Okay. All right, so now that's open, and we need to go to File, Add, Snap-in, Active Directory users and computers. This one here. Okay. And okay, so it says we need to enable advanced features. We can do that by going to View. Sure I'm in the right spot here. There it is. Okay, I guess it's enabled. We can find the AD/SD holder group, domain, system. So let me try to make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, there's system here, and there it is. So let's navigate to the security of the group, right click, and properties, security. Okay. It says let's add our low privileged user account and grant full control. So click add, and then Chloe.Potter, like so, and check names. There it is. That and then full control. Allow. Yeah. Okay. Apply and then okay. Sweet. It should look something like this. So if you go back into it to double check stuff, should be there. It is. Okay. Awesome. SD prop. Now we just need to wait 60 minutes and our user will have full control over all protected groups. This is because the security descriptor propagator, SD prop, serves to execute automatically every 60 minutes and will propagate this change to all protected groups. However, since we do not like to wait, let's kick off this process manually by using PowerShell and ctools invoke the following. Okay, so let's do that. I'm assuming they want us to do this on this box here. So let me get back. All right, now this little script here is on the DC. Make sure to log back in as the administrator, like I did here. Went to the tools folder, got into PowerShell, and then did the rest there. All right, it says give it a minute, and then review the security permissions of a protected group, such as the domain admins group. So let's flip back over to RDP session here and MC. So let's see if we can find that group in here. There it is. Is this the search here? Let's see. Yeah. So let's go ahead and type this in. There we go. Right click, properties, and then security. And there we are. Bam. Yep, full control, everything. Awesome. So let's see. As can be seen, our low privileged user has full control over the group. You can verify that this will continue to propagate by removing your user from the security permissions and rerunning the PowerShell script. Your user will be added again. Interestingly, although we have permissions to modify this group, it does not automatically add us to the group. So you can try to run it again to see if it shows back up here. I'm not going to do it. However, using our new permissions, we can add ourselves to the group. Okay. Right. You can go through the process and do that again. So go to members, then you go to add, type in your name. Okay, apply, bam, done. Okay, it is going downhill for the blue team. Imagine combining this with the nesting groups of the previous task. Just as the blue team finished revoking your access through numerous group changes, 60 minutes later, you can just do it all again. Unless the blue team understands that the permissions are being altered through the admin SD holder group, they would be scratching their heads every 60 minutes. Since the persistence propagates through a legitimate AD service, they would most likely be none the wiser every time it happens. If you really want to persist, you can grant full control to the domain users group in the admin SD holder group, which means any low privileged user would be granted full control over all protected groups. Combining this with a full DC sync means the blue team will have to reset every single credential in the domain to flush us out completely. Yeah, that's a huge pain in the neck. All right, what AD groups ACLs are used as a template for the ACLs of all protected groups? That's going to be the admin as the holder. What AD service updates ACLs of all protected groups to match that of the template SD prop? What ACL permission allows the user to perform any action on the AD object? That's going to be full control. All right, task number 8 says persistence through GPOs. And let's see what they say here. The last persistence technique we will review is persistence through group policy objects, GPOs. At this point, you should be familiar with GPOs based on all the different enumeration, attack, and exploitation techniques we have discussed. However, GPOs are also excellent for deploying persistence. Group policy management in AD provides a central mechanism to manage the local policy configuration of all domain join machines. This includes configurations such as membership to restricted groups, firewall, and AV configuration, and which scripts should be executed upon startup. While this is an excellent tool for management, it can be targeted by attackers to deploy persistence across the entire estate. What is even worse is that the attacker can often hide the GPO in such a way that it becomes almost impossible to remove it. Domain-wide persistence. The following are some common GPO persistence techniques. Restricted group membership. This could allow us administrative access to all hosts in the domain. Log-on script deployment. This will ensure that we will get a shell callback every time a user authenticates to a host in the domain. There are many different hooks that can be deployed. You can play around with the GPOs to learn about other hooks since we already used the first hook, restricted group membership, and the exploiting AD groom. Let's now focus on the second hook. While having access to all hosts are nice, it can be even better by ensuring we can access to them or get access to them when administrators are actively working on them. To do this, we will create a GPO that is linked to the admin's OU, which will allow us to get a shell on a host every time one of them authenticates to a host. Preparation. Before we can create the GPO, we first need to create our shell listener and the actual bat file that will execute our shell. Let's start by generating a basic executable shell that we can use. Okay, we're gonna do this and then make sure to add the username to the binary to avoid overriding the shells of other users. Windows allows us to execute batch or PowerShell scripts through the logon GPO. Batch scripts are often more stable than PowerShell scripts so let's create one that will copy our executable to the host and execute it once a user authenticates. Create the following script called username underscore script.bat on the attack box. Copy yada yada yada. Okay. You will see that the script executes three commands chained together with an and. The script will copy the binary from the sysvault directory to the local machine and then wait 20 seconds before finally executing the binary. We can use SCP in our administrator credentials to copy both scripts to the sysvault directory, like shown. Finally, let's start our MSF listener here. With our prep now complete, we can now create a GPO that will execute it. You will need to RDP into THM work 1 and use run as administrator for the next steps. Okay, so let's go through and do all this, and then we'll come back to this GPO creation. I'm ready to go. Got my listener running, and I'm still RDP'd in. I've already added the snapshot for the group policy management. Okay, and it says you should be able to see the GPO manager. Yep. Well, we can technically write our own contents to the default domain policy, which should propagate to all AD objects. Let me just move this over a little bit. Okay. It says, yeah, we should propagate to all AD objects. We will take a more narrow approach for this task, just to show the process. You can play around afterwards to apply the changes to the entire domain. We will write a GPO that will be applied to all admins. So right click on the admin's OU. Okay, let me find it first. Right click, awesome. And then once you create, link it here, give the GPO name such as the following. So let's do Chloe Potter. There. Okay. I Access denied. Well, let's do this again. I thought I was running as the admin already, but apparently not. So let me go ahead and grab this password and do it again. Okay. All right. So add remove snapping, and then we need the GPO one. So this here. Access denied. I mean, access denied. What the heck? Um. Okay. All right. Let's try this. Cancel out of that. And open up a new prompt here. CMD as administrator. And let's try this here. Okay. Now let's see if this works. All right. Now we should be good. Like, well, I guess we'll find out. Okay. Right click in your policy, select enforce. Okay. This will ensure that your policy will apply even if there is a conflicting policy. This can help to ensure our GPO takes precedence even if the blue team has written a policy that will remove our changes. Now you can right click on your policy and select edit. So let's go ahead and do that. Policy. Actually, where is it? There. Oops. Make sure I did this. I didn't click the wrong one here. Yeah. All right. Now let's try it. Okay. So let's get back to our group policy manager editor. Under user configuration, expand policies and Windows settings, scripts, log on, log off. Right click on log on properties, and then select scripts tab. Already in there. Let's do says add in the browse, and now we just need to locate that script since sysvol. Now to get to this, make sure to do double backslash, right? And then type it in. All right, you're gonna go to scripts, and it says select your batch file as the script, and then click open and OK. So my batch file is gonna be this here. Okay, open. Sure. Okay. This will ensure that every time one of your administrators tier 1 or tier 2, 1, and 0 log into machine, it will get a callback. In order to simulate this, let's reset the password from one of our tier 1 administrator accounts and authenticate to a server. Use any techniques you've learned in the previous 80 rooms to either reset the password of one of the tier 1 administrators. Once done, remember to start your MSF multi-handler, and let's test it out, RDPing into TH server 1 and 2. Use tier 1 administrator credentials, RDP into one of the servers. If you get give it another minute, you should get a callback to multi-handler. Note, you will need to create a logon event for the GPO to execute. If you just close out your RDP session, that only performs a disconnect from, which means not trigger GPO. Make sure to select native or navigate to a sign out shown below, terminate the session to ensure that a logon event is generated when you re-authenticate, hiding in plain sight. Okay, let's see here. All right, so if everything goes right, you should be able, yeah, there we go. See, um, yeah. So let's go ahead and continue. We can do a, so I guess get UID, right? Yeah. Hiding in plain sight. Now that we have, or now that we know that our persistence is working, it is time to make sure the blue team can't simply remove our persistence. Go back to the MMC window, click on your policy, and then click on delegation policy. Okay. And it says to click on delegation, which is this tab here. And by default, all administrators have the ability to edit GPOs. Let's remove these permissions. Right click on enterprise domain controllers. So span this over. Okay. And it says edit settings, delete modify security. Yes. Okay. Click on all other groups, click remove. Okay. So, okay, I guess remove all this other stuff in there. Awesome. And it should be the only one, the only two in here. All right, so that's done. Should be left with delegation looks like this. Click on advanced and remove the owner. So advanced and create owner. Okay, remove that. Apply it. Okay, done. By default, all authenticated users must have the ability to read the policy. This is required because otherwise the policy cannot be read by the user's account when they authenticate to apply user policies. If we did not have our logon script, we could also remove this permission to make sure that almost no one would be able to read our policy. We could replace authenticated users with domain computers to ensure that computers can still read and apply the policy, but prevent any user from reading the policy. Let's do this to test, but remember this can result in you not getting a shell back or a shell callback upon authentication, since the user will not be able to read the PowerShell script. So make sure to test the shell before performing these steps. There's no going back after this. Okay, so it says click add domain controllers. Okay, add, and then computers, like so. Check names. There we go. Read permissions. Okay, authenticated users. Click remove. Done. Yep. So it even gives you a warning. You can see on the sidebar that we no longer can read this policy. Yep, inaccessible. By performing these steps, we can ensure that even with the highest level of permissions, the blue team will not be able to remove our GPO unless they impersonated the machine account of a domain controller. This makes it extra hard to firstly discover, and even if they discover the GPO, it would be incredibly hard to remove. We don't even have the required permissions to interface with our policy anymore. So no one will have to stay there until a network, so one will have to stay there until a network reset is performed. You can verify that the GPO is still applied by RDPing into one of the TTM servers. So try that out if you're interested. This says what MM snap-in can be used to manage GPOs. That is group policy manage, I think management. Yeah. What sub GPO is used to grant users and groups access to local groups on the host that applies to GPOs to, what was that called? What tab is used to modify the security permissions that users and groups have on the GPO? That was the delegation. No, if I could spell it correctly. There we go. What was the sub GPO? This last one is restricted groups. All right. Task number 9, conclusion. Let's wrap things up here. There are several different ways that we can persist in AD. Some of these techniques persist better than others. In order to ensure that persistence cannot be removed by the blue team, you will have to think creatively about persistence. Furthermore, you should not wait until the full domain compromise to deploy persistence. After each round of lateral movement and privilege escalation, persistence should be deployed. Additional persistent techniques. In this network, we covered several techniques that can be used to persist in AD. This is by no means an exhaustive list. Here is a list of persistent techniques that also deserve mention. All right, so pause the video and read over these and check them out if you're interested. You got skeleton keys, you got directory service restore mode, DSRM, you got malicious security support provider, SSP, and computer counts. We should also note that this room focused on persistent techniques in AD. Several local persistent techniques can also allow for persistence on hosts. If these hosts are domain joined, it will allow for persistence in AD as well. Mitigations. AD persistence can be a pain to defend against. In certain cases, the persistence can be so deeply rooted that a complete domain rebuild is required. However, there are a couple of things that we can do to detect deployed persistence. Anomalous count logon events are the most common alert for persistence. Anytime credentials break the tiering model, it could be as a result of persistence. For each of the persistence techniques mentioned, specific detection rules can be written, such as cases when a machine account's password changes, ACLs are permissively updated, or new GPOs are created. The best defense against persistence is to protect privileged account or privileged resources. Although low privileged access can be used to deploy persistence, the truly scary techniques only become available once an attacker has acquired privileged access to the domain. This concludes the AD module. We have learned about the basics of AD, how to breach an AD environment, enumerate it, perform exploitation, and deeply root ourselves in with persistence. This module is just an introduction. There is still a lot to learn about AD security. Time to spread your wings and do some of your own exploration. I understand AD persistence. All right. As it said there, be sure to learn more about AD security, how to hack into it, how to defend against such attacks, etc., all that good stuff. Now, if you found this video of value, if you got any type of good information out of it, please consider hitting that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here so you can enjoy more of this content and we can grow our glorious community here. Share the video, all that good stuff. As always, thank you all for taking time to watch my video, and I will see you later. Have a nice one.